Dear students and parents, gives me immense pleasure and privilege to introduce the guest for this episode of In Conversation series. Joining us from Irvine, California is Mohnish Pabrai, managing partner and founder of Pabrai Funds, managing assets upwards of 800 million US dollars. But most importantly, a person with whom I have worked closely in the education sector in India, the person who started the Dakshana Foundation to train students for selections into the prestigious Indian Institutes of Technology, students who otherwise would have found the training programs for the IIT JEE difficult to afford. And the success of that model is very clearly the results it have produced. And I have been really privileged to have worked closely with this gentleman for the last decade plus in this area. And I'm sure the students will love the wisdom coming out of this professional. Joining us from Irvine, California, Mohnish Pabrai. Thanks a lot for joining us, Mohnish.
Well, Ajay, it's a pleasure to be with you, and I have to say that I have always enjoyed our interactions and association. I think I was always very happy with all the service you and your team provided us when you were with your previous employer, and I also really like the focus that you've given to the physics chamber. Not trying to be a jack of all trades. I think you've honed in on a critical need, and I think your execution on it has been really good. So it's been really wonderful to watch you as an entrepreneur, and I've had a lot of respect for what you've accomplished. So it's wonderful to be here with you.
Thank you so much for the nice words, Mohnish. Students, Mohnish Pabrai is a self-confessed disciple of the practices of the Oracle of Omaha, Warren Buffett. And I guess we will start off from there itself. Somebody who I was actually, when I first met Mohnish about 12 years back, I was actually taken aback when somebody of his stature would publicly say that I don't really do anything original. I actually study the best and then copy and paste their principles. How exactly are you able to say these words in public, Mohnish, if you could just say it in your own words?
Well, I think that cloning is a mental model that can give anyone who does it a huge edge in life. So I think Buffett's partner, Charlie Munger, talks about mental models, and he talks about the lattice work of mental models, where you overlay different models on top of each other. So if you uncover a truth about human behavior, and it is not generally well understood by most humans, it's going to give you an edge. So one of the quirks about humans is that somehow most humans think that copying or cloning is beneath them. It's something which is maybe not to be done. But actually, the exact opposite is true. If you look at a company like Microsoft, almost everything they have built, and they've built a very successful business, has been cloned from somewhere else. And so, for example, Word came out of WordPerfect. Excel was copied from Lotus. Explorer was copied from Netscape, and Microsoft Money from Quicken. And even now, when they've gone into Azure and the cloud, they're trying to catch up with Amazon Web Services. So even MS-DOS, which was their original operating system, was not built by Microsoft. They actually bought MS-DOS from a small company, and then adapted it and so on. So basically, almost all of the success of the business has come from copying and cloning. The same thing is with Walmart. Sam Walton spent an enormous amount of time in his competitor stores. And at least for probably the first 20 years of Walmart's existence, there was nothing that Walmart did that had not been done before. And in fact, Sam Walton used to say that He got all his best ideas from his competitors, and so cloning has been really a powerful tool. And I found when I was probably I still have not understood why humans have an aversion to cloning. I don't know why exactly that kind of genetic programming is there in us. But what I do know, because I've studied it for almost 3 decades, that there is a sliver of humans who embrace cloning. And those humans have gotten an unfair advantage in life because they've done that. And so when I encountered Buffett's approach to investing, which was, I think, in 1994, almost like 27 years ago. One of the things that perplexed me was that hardly anyone followed that approach. So when I looked at the industry, the investment management industry, I had expected to find that they would be following Warren Buffett's approach because he had the best record and he had, in an open book format, shared the approach he had taken. So it was not secret. He had broadly shared and written about his approach, but all these quote unquote industry participants and experts did not use his approach. So I said, okay, I understand why they're not using it, because the same thing happens in many other fields, and it means there's an opportunity. And so I decided I'm going to go all in and embrace it. And it worked really well because there's very few people who do it.
All right, great. I'm still trying to get over the honest admission part of it. Maybe that's all the reason that we are all wired like that. I mean, how can somebody be so transparent saying that I just use this, I don't have anything original with me types?
Well, I'll give you an example. Like for example, Radhakrishan Damani. R.K. Damani is one of the richest men in India. And now he is a strong supporter of Dakshina. He gives us about 7 crores every year. And he would give us more, but we just can't use the money. Our model cannot use that much money. And I spent a day with him when he had come to our campus in Pune and so on. And I asked him a lot of questions about DMART. So I said, how does a guy who's like an investor and a trader start a company like DMART? How does that happen? Right? Because it's not just a company he founded, it became very successful. And he's a man of few words, and he would just be quiet when I ask him the question. So I said, look, it's a 3-hour ride. I'll keep repeating the same question for the next 3 hours. So if you want to keep hearing me ask the same question and you keep quiet, then I'll be like a record player on repeat, right? So he said to me after a while, I read a book. Okay. So I said, okay, like which book did you read? So he said, I read Sam Walton's autobiography, okay, Made in America. So I said that book was published, that book has sold millions of copies and been published in almost every language imaginable. I said a few million people read that book. Okay, I don't see a few million DMARTs set up. I only see one DMART. So he said, I read that book many times. Okay. And he said, then I studied that model very carefully. And actually, if you look at DMART is a cloned model of Walmart and Costco. There is almost nothing original about what DMART is doing. And most of their competitors, even though it is very transparent exactly how they are doing so well, no one follows that model. And so DMART is basically a monopoly.
So that is testimony to the fact that it really works in different places. Yes.
It is a very powerful model. Yes.
Yes. Students, I have always felt I have not really discussed this aspect with Mohnish. I'm sure I hope I will catch him by surprise also on this, that I have always felt that if Mohnish had not become an ace investor, he would probably have become the best teacher around, given his style of teaching. And I've actually seen him teach also in classroom situations. And my thinking when I went into this the discussion is probably I could actually get him to speak like the way he would speak to in front of the students with a chalk in his hand. And he enjoys doing that. Let me tell you. And he loves math. He is an engineer by training, but then shifted to investment later on because of his initiation to Warren Buffett's principles, like he explained. So I have heard him directly speak to young students, pretty much like the age group that students attend the physics chamber, about the power of compounding. And that something is something that which has really been of very great interest to me also. Although I have heard it several times from him, let me request him to sort of narrate it in a form that will make sense for the young audience that we are addressing.
Absolutely. So, we talked about mental models, and cloning is a mental model that will give you a huge edge in life. Understanding the power of compounding, no matter what your eventual profession ends up being, is going to also give you a huge edge in life. And especially, like I said, when you cross-pollinate with different models, then you get what Charlie Munger would call Lulapalooza effects. 1 + 1 becomes 11. And so you get a lot of advantage with that. So I can maybe give your students maybe 2 examples that might help them understand why Einstein said that compounding is the 8th wonder of the world. And so a few years back, when my younger daughter was about 18 years old, she had just done an internship, summer internship before starting college. And she had made about $5,000 over the summer, 3 months. And I told her, listen, this $5,000, you don't really need it. Can we open a Roth IRA account, which is a kind of like a retirement account? It basically the money in that account stays tax-free forever, including all the growth of that account. So you can put about $7,000 a year into an account like that in the US. And she said, yeah, no problem. I said, and is it okay with you? I said, if you give me power of attorney to manage that account. She said, yeah, sure. So I said, this $5,000, let's say I am able to grow it at 15% a year. So I said that when you are 68 years old, how much would this $5,000 have become? So, this was like 2 a.m. I'm driving her back to the airport, and she's sleepy, and she said, I don't know. So I said, well, rule of 72, which is a kind of a shortcut we use with compounding, which is something you can Google and look up. But basically, if you do 72 divided by 15, it is approximately 5. And so a 15% compounded return is going to double every 5 years. So the $5,000 when she is 23 years old would become 10,000. And then when she is 28 years old will become 20,000. And when she's 33 years old, it'll become 40,000, and so on. It'll keep doubling every 5 years. And from 18 to 68 is 50 years. And 50 years, if you chop it up into 5-year chunks, is 10 doubles. So 10 doubles is 2 to the power of 10, which is 1,024. And so let's throw away the 24 because we want to do math in our heads. So $5,000 would become $5 million because we would add 3 zeros, right? And so I said, well, at 68, you would have $5 million. So now she's wide awake. Okay, how did 5,000 become? Because 5,000 is about, 3.5 lakhs, right? And 5 million is, about 35 crores. So it's a pretty significant jump from 3.5 lakhs to 35 crores. So then I said, but this is $5 million that has come from your earnings just from one summer internship. When you are 19, you may do another internship. You may make another $5,000. And at 68 or 69, that's going to be another 5 million. And at some point, you will graduate, maybe at 22. And instead of 5,000, you might be saving 10, 15,000 because your income will be up. And that's going to go through a 40, 50-year compounding. And over time, you'll get raises and you'll keep putting this some money away and so on. So I said, what would be the total amount of money you would have if we did this compounding with all your income and everything going through? How much money would you have at 68? She said, I don't know, it's too big a number. My head will explode. And you can see that when you run the power of compounding, the surprising thing is, why does everyone not end up wealthy? Because basically, acorns grow into oaks. But the important thing is that you have to spend less than you earn, right? And you have to put the money away, and you have to have some reasonable way, like you can buy an index fund or something, some reasonable way to run that money and take it from there. So in the 1950s, Buffett wrote a letter to his investors, and he brought up the deal the American Indians in 1626 had done with the Dutch. So in 1626, these Inuit Indians in the US owned the island of Manhattan. In New York, the island of Manhattan was owned by the Indians, and the Dutch wanted to buy that island. So they approached the Indians, and they were able to come to an agreement to buy the island for $20. And so in 1626, a transaction was done. $20 was given to the Indians, and title of that island that we now know as Manhattan passed to the Dutch. And so when people hear that story, they say, oh, the Indians got taken advantage of. This is so much land and so precious and so important. But, the thing that Buffett brings up is that, let's say the Indians had a trust officer or investment officer who was given this $20 and said, please invest this for the benefit of the tribe. And let's say that trust officer was not able to get 15% a year. Let's say he's only able to get 7% a year return. So we can again use the rule of 72. And so the money will double every 10 years. Okay. So 1636 will become $40, and 1646 will become $80, and so on. So if you take a 100-year period, it's 10 doubles. Same thing, just like we saw before. And 10 doubles we know is 1,024. So what happens is the 1626 $20 in 1725 is $20,000. And in 1825, it is $20 million. And in 1925, it's $20 billion. And in 2025, it is $20 trillion. Okay. Now we are not at 2025. So we have to take away maybe a few years. So you can say that in 2016, it was $10 trillion. There was one more double coming, and maybe it's 7%, you would be maybe at 12, 13 trillion or something by 2021. So undeveloped land in Manhattan, which was sold in 1626, if it had compounded at 7%, it would be, 12 or 13 trillion dollars. So then the question is, how does that compare to the actual value of that land today? And we don't have an exact idea, but we can make a good guess. So if you look at the entire wealth of the United States, all the wealth of every man, woman, and child in the US, it is about 125 trillion. All the homes, all the stocks, all the Apple, Google, everything, you include everything, it's about 125 trillion. Okay. Manhattan is just one relatively small city. It's a big city, but it's a very small part of the US. And probably if you did the study of how much land is being sold in Manhattan for, you will come up with a value of a few $1 billion, maybe 50 billion, possibly maybe 100 billion or something. It would not even be like 1% of the 13 trillion. Okay. Now, the thing is, we can go backwards also. So like 1626, $20. If you go back 100 years, 1526, you would take away 3 zeros, right? So it's 2000 cents is $20. It would be 2 cents. Okay, so the deal had happened 100 years before that at 2 cents, you would still have the 13 trillion today. And if you go back another 10 years, you would be down to 1 cent. Okay, so 1 cent also becomes. So the thing is that this is the magic of compounding. So there are 3 variables that matter in terms of how things compound. So one is the amount of money you start with, right? That's the first variable. The second variable is the compounding rate, 5%, 7%, 15%, etc. And the third is the length of the runway, right? How many years do you have, right? So if you have a very long runway, it doesn't matter how much money you start with, and it also doesn't matter how low the compounding rate is. So even with a relatively low compounding rate, and even with a relatively low starting amount, like in our case, 1 cent, you still end up with a huge number. And so, sometimes Warren Buffett has asked, hey, Mr. Buffett, if a genie came to you and said, Mr. Buffett, you can have any wish you want, what would you wish for? So he always says that I would just ask the genie to set it up so that when I die and they look at my corpse, they should say, man, he was old. Okay. So the one thing he wants to do is he wants to live for a very long time. And the reason he wants to live for a very long time is not because he's in love with you and me and sharing planet Earth with us. He wants to maximize the length of the runway. So in Warren Buffett's case, he started compounding seriously, probably in his late teens. And by 19 or 20, he had accumulated about $10,000 by the time he was 20, doing a lot of jobs, odds and ends, different things. And that was 1950. Then the engine started. And from 1950 till now, which has been about 71 years, he has been compounding at about 20% a year. Okay. So if you just think about it, 20% a year with the rule of 72 is a double every 3.5 years, right? So, which means that 35 years is 10 doubles and 70 years is 20 doubles. Okay. So $10,000 after 10 doubles will become 10 million. And $10 million after 10 doubles will become 10 billion. Okay. If he had not given away his money, he would be approaching about 150 billion because he was managing other people's money and then he was earning money on that. So 10,000 was just money he had at 20. After that, he had jobs and different things he did So there was more added to that pie. And we end up because of the power of compounding, became the wealthiest person. So it's very important to understand the power of compounding.
Thank you so much, Mohnish. I think students will love this narration, and I hope that this talk will sort of encourage students to actually save and invest regularly from their young age, probably starting from their first salary onwards itself. Now we have a little time left, so I'll take up a couple of questions that students have sent in. One is, uh, did you actually become better at your own game of investing over the last 3 decades? How have you actually matured as an investor, given the length of time you have been in this line itself?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, if I were a cricket player or a basketball player, my skills and expertise would keep getting better for a while. Then I would peak probably maybe late 20s, early 30s. And then there would be a secular decline. Basically, I mean, if we look at Tendulkar or Gavaskar or Virat Kohli or any of these guys, they will peak and then they will go down. The beautiful thing about the compounding game and the investing game is one can keep getting better for the entire journey. So, for example, Warren Buffett is still getting better at his game. He is still learning and still improving as an investor. Because, the thing is that we want to, one of the things about investing is all knowledge is cumulative. So as you go on in time and you do different investments and learn about different businesses, you have seen more and more patterns. And then later, the same patterns come up in a different format. And then you can say, yeah, I've seen this before, and so on. So things can click a lot faster. So one of the beautiful things about investing is that the learning and growth can continue as long as your brain is functioning. And so it's a huge advantage to be in a field where your decline is not starting in your 30s or 40s or 50s, and you can keep expanding and growing, which is wonderful.
Great, great. Thank you so much. Now, the next one is from a parent. I'm sure that you will be more than qualified to answer this because you have directly interacted with hundreds of students who have actually made it to the top institutes. The parent says that my son/daughter is not very bright and intelligent, but then she can be made to work hard. So therefore, can my child get into one of these institutes, given that right now my child is just an average student?
Yeah, so actually, there have been a number of individuals who have gone into fields that they did not have expertise in, and they eventually became amongst the best in the world in those areas. And so, I mean, I may not like this answer I'm giving you myself, but any system can be gamed, okay, including the entrance exam for the IITs, etc. So, for example, if you talk to chemistry teachers, they will tell you that certain parts of the chemistry portion of the JE is where you can get a lot of points. They're high scoring areas. I think that if one is willing to put in the effort and one is willing to put their nose to the grindstone. So, for example, we had one student in Dakshina who got a rank of 63, Ashok Kumar, who's now at Google. Uh, Ashok, I think in the last month, did every paper for the last 30 years given by twice. He basically took the full JE test 60 times before actually sitting down for the test. And of course, when he would take the test, he would go back and look at questions he could not answer and study that and so on and so forth. So obviously, if you have seen so much pattern recognition, the future papers are derivatives of past papers. People who set papers are a little bit lazy sometimes, right? And so I think that this is a situation that JEE and these other competitive exams, one has to have a good strategy and one has to have a good coach. So for example, that's one of the things I like about the physics chamber is you guys are all in on physics and you have looked at what is the best way to get input output ratio in terms of effort put in by the student and the results they come out with. So definitely I think that the people who do the best in the JEE test and other competitive tests may not be the brightest people, but they probably are the ones who've really worked hard. And so I think you can cover a lot of deficiencies if you are passionate. Passion will go a long ways, and if you really want something. So there's a quote in the Upanishads. It says that as is your wish, so is your will. As is your will, so is your deed. As is your deed, so is your destiny. And then the punchline it says is your deepest desire is your destiny. So if you desire to study at the IITs, the question is it your deepest desire? And if it is your deepest desire, it will happen. But you have to translate the will into the deed.
Great, great. It's so nice that you brought up the name of Ashok because our students are very familiar with that name, and that's a number that they also know. That Mohnish, thanks a lot for bringing up that name. Another question is from a young student who happened to see you posing in front of your car in the garage, your recent tweet, and he wants to ask, how fast do you go in your Ferrari?
Well, thank you very much. Well, the Ferrari can go pretty fast, but so I went last year for 2 days of Ferrari driving school, and so I spent 2 days with a bunch of other Ferrari owners on the racetrack, and we had professional Ferrari drivers with us. So I cannot do what I did on the racetrack on the roads. I mean, in about 10 minutes, I would be ticketed, and probably if I did it 3 or 4 times, I would permanently lose my license. But on the racetrack, there's no speed limits. In fact, they were training us for all the techniques to be a good race car driver. And that was a lot of fun. And I drove 2 different Ferraris on that track. So one was the F12 Superfast. It's a 12-cylinder. It's not the fastest Ferrari, but it's got a lot of horsepower. I think about they hadn't put the car in the fastest mode because I was in the kind of the beginner program. I have to go take 2 more classes, but I think about like 170 miles an hour or so on the track. So around 250 kilometers per hour.
250 kilometers per hour. That's really
Right.
fast.
Oh yeah. I mean, but the thing is that you've got brakes that are pretty powerful, and I've got a professional driver sitting next to me, and I'm on a track where there's no other. I mean, there are other cars on the track, but they're nowhere near me, and so it's very hard to really have a crash in that scenario. So it was great. Actually, it was really fantastic. It was wonderful to be. On the roads, what I can do, which I do probably once in a while, is from a zero start, I can floor it. I can floor the Ferrari and let it go because they won't ticket you till you get to 100 miles an hour or something, about 150 kilometers. So I'll let it go till about 80, 90 miles per hour and then ease off. So you can get even on the road, you can get a good thrill as long as you are the first car on the red light.
Right.
And if you're the first car on the red light, you will not see any other cars around you.
That's a nice thought. Well, students, you have taken up.
But I will say that. So I bought the Ferrari because actually I had invested in the company and I made a lot of money for me and my investors from the Ferrari stock. And in the process, I actually got to know the family in Italy. They're good friends actually, and I visited the Ferrari family Ferrari factory in Modena and Maranello. So it was just a great experience. And so I said, okay, we've done so much with the company, and I learned a lot about the company. When I made the investment, I said, might as well have the car. And now I've had the car for about 3 years, and it's great. It's wonderful. I am very happy with that kind of new dimension to my life.
Great. I mean, I think many of our students are real fans of that movie which came out recently, Ford versus Ferrari. I'm sure that you must have seen that movie also.
Yeah, it's a wonderful movie. Yes.
Yeah.
And then also, I think you guys, probably your students have also seen the Formula One on Netflix. Netflix has done a series of Formula One, which is also pretty good. So.
Yes. So, students, we have taken up 30 minutes of Monish's time. Last time when Monish was in Kerala, I had requested him to drop by the physics chamber because the logic being that once he touches down at the Cochin airport and he wants to move towards his destination, there is no way he can move without passing in front of our office. And that, in fact, he did give us the time, but the time was on the Christmas Day morning, which did not suit me actually. So next time, let me promise you, whatever be the time, we will arrange a class so that you can just drop in for 10 minutes, say hi to our students who are present, and then that will be a great motivation to everybody around.
Yeah, no, I was looking forward to that, and sorry it didn't work, but hopefully, so I make it a point every year to come to Kerala. In fact, I ask myself many times, why do I not live in Kerala all the time? Okay, and I still don't have a good answer to that question. At some point, I might base myself 100% in Kerala, because if there is heaven on earth, it is Kerala.
Wow, that's some compliment. So I guess people living here permanently wouldn't understand the value of the place here anyway. So we really look forward to your visit, Mohnish, whenever it is possible. And thank you so much for taking the time out. We have taken about 40 minutes of your time, and really wonderful catching you from Irvine in California. Students, from all of us at the physics chamber, myself, my fellow teachers, and the students and the parents, warmest wishes, and thank you so much for joining us in this short session.
Thank you, Ajay, and again, I wish you and the students all the very best. I know COVID has created a lot of challenges, but also probably led to some innovation in your business, and so I just hope you go from strength to strength. So all the best.